Welcome back to this series on molt in shorebirds and other waterbirds. In parts 1 and 2, we covered the adult or definitive molt cycle, which includes pre-basic and pre-alternate molts, producing basic and alternate plumages respectively. In this section, we're going to look at how old feathers are replaced with new ones, and in particular, how this follows a somewhat predictable sequence. I should give credit to two excellent sources for much of the information in this and my other videos on molt. The first is a book called Molt in North American Birds by Steve N.G. Howell, and the second is The Identification Guide to North American Birds Part 2 by Peter Pyle. I'll give more details of these books in the video comments. Any mistakes, however, are entirely my own doing. In simple terms, the way that feathers are replaced is that the new feather develops within a protective waxy sheath in what is known as a follicle in the skin. Think of the way that teeth grow. As the new feather grows, it dislodges the old feather so that it drops out, creating a gap which the new feather gradually fills. As the new feather grows, it breaks out of its protective sheath, expands in width a bit like a flower petal, and extends gradually in length until it is fully grown. On a molting bird's wing, we can often see gaps caused by dropped old feathers. In the coverts, these may appear as an area of white, caused by the dropped feather leaving the bases of the underlying feathers exposed. In the case of flight feathers, dropped feathers cause a gap in the trailing edge of the wing or tail. Because flight feathers are replaced sequentially, the gap may be flanked by old feathers on one side and new ones on the other. Molt sequence of body feathers is hard to track, since the feathers are mostly small. Pre-basic body molt often begins with the head, and then the mantle and scapulars, followed by the breast, and ending with the rump, flanks and vent. Pre-alternate molt is more rapid than pre-basic molt because it does not involve the replacement of any of the large flight feathers. Normally, the last feathers to be replaced in pre-alternate molt are the scapulars and a variable number of coverts. During pre-basic molt, or in the case of Oriental Praticole, pre-alternate molt involving flight feathers, flight feather molt occurs either before, during, or after body feather molt. And this is much easier to track than body molt, since the feathers are larger than the body feathers. Some birds replace their primaries, secondaries and wing coverts at the same time, or almost so. This is the quickest way to grow a full set of new feathers. However, the downside is that the bird becomes flightless for up to 5 weeks while the new feathers grow. So only species which can remain safe from predators while flightless use this strategy. In Malaysia, this includes Oriental darter, little grebe, rails and crakes, and ducks. Shorebirds, and most other waterbirds, replace their flight feathers sequentially. Feathers are replaced 1 or 2 at a time, enabling the bird to maintain the power of flight throughout the molt process. Pre-basic flight feather molt sequence usually begins with the innermost primary and its matching primary covert, and then moves toward the end of the wing 1 feather at a time. Primaries are numbered from the innermost, P1, to the outermost functional primary, P10. There is actually a P11, but it's so tiny that we normally ignore it. When primary molt reaches about P5 or P6, secondary molt begins. Secondary molt can occur in several places at once, from the outermost secondary toward the body, and from S5 toward the body, and from the tertials moving outward. So the outermost primaries and the middle secondaries are usually the last feathers to become fully grown in a new molt. Tail feathers are numbered in pairs, starting with the central pair, T1, and moving out to the outer pair, T6 in the case of most shorebirds, which have 12 tail feathers. Tail molt usually moves from the center outwards, although the outer pair, T6, is usually replaced before T4 and T5. There are always exceptions to this sequence, and one of those we will look at in a later video, but this explanation will cover the majority of cases. So, in this third video on molt in shorebirds and other waterbirds, we have learned that feathers are molted in a systematic and somewhat predictable sequence, and this can be useful when trying to determine the age of a bird. But when and where do shorebirds and other waterbirds molt? We'll look at molt timing in part 4. Thanks for watching. See you next time.